The woman who stole my business cut my cheek with the clasp of her white fox coat and told me I should be grateful she had not aimed for my eye. It happened at 2:07 in the morning, under the gold lights of St. Harbor, the kind of Manhattan nightclub where people paid $80 for a cocktail just to pretend the ice was different. I was standing behind the coat check counter in a black uniform, flat shoes, and a brass name tag that said Isabel. That was my real name, though almost nobody in that room knew it anymore. Vivian Cross shoved the coat into my chest before I had time to raise both hands. The metal clasp scraped across my face, sharp and cold, and I felt the first hot line of blood slide toward my jaw. Her perfume hit me next, heavy and floral, the kind of scent that did not smell expensive so much as aggressive. "Careful, sweetheart," she said, looking down at Michaud's. "That coat costs more than your apartment." Her friends laughed. There were 3 of them that night, all lifted cheekbones, diamond bracelets, and bored eyes. Behind Vivian stood her husband, Grant Cross, CEO of Crosspoint Urban, a real estate technology company that bought tired neighborhoods, renamed them Innovation Corridors, and priced out everyone who had ever made those neighborhoods worth visiting. Grant did not laugh. He rarely wasted energy on laughter. He just watched me with the relaxed face of a man who believed every room was already his. The manager, Paul, hurried over with a napkin. "Isabel, clean yourself up in the back," he whispered. "And hang Mrs. Cross's coat carefully." Vivian widened her eyes like she was offended by the word carefully. "Carefully," she said. "Paul, I'd rather she hang herself carefully away from the pockets." More laughter. I kept my face still. That was one thing poverty taught me better than any etiquette coach could have: how not to react when someone wanted your painless entertainment. I picked up the coat from where it had fallen across the counter and slipped the hanger through the shoulders. Soft white fur slid over my fingers like something alive. I placed it on rack 6 and handed Vivian the ticket. The number printed on it was 777. She glanced at it and smirked. "Lucky number," she said, "maybe you'll find a better job." I looked at her red mouth, her perfect hair, the diamonds at her ears, and the smug little tilt of her chin that had haunted me for 2 years. Then I smiled. "Maybe I already did." She frowned for half a second, but then someone called her name from the VIP stairs and the moment passed. Vivian Cross never gave her full attention to people she thought were beneath her. That was one of her weaknesses. It was also the reason she had never recognized me. 2 years earlier, I had not been hanging coats. I had been refusing them. I owned a small nightclub in the Lower East Side called Blue Mercy. It was not huge, not flashy, and not designed for people like Vivian. The walls were midnight blue, the bar was copper, and on Thursdays we had live jazz. Sawgood people stopped talking when the trumpet came in. On Saturdays the floor shook until 4 a.m. We had artists, chefs, off-duty Broadway dancers, nurses after double shifts, young lawyers who wanted to feel human again, and once, a famous actor who sat in the corner and cried into a ginger ale while my bartender pretended not to notice. I built Blue Mercy with my father's retirement savings, for maxed-out credit cards, a second mortgage on the little Queens house where I grew up, and the kind of stubbornness people call admirable only after it works. For 14 months, it worked. Then Vivian Cross arrived without a reservation on a rainy Friday night, already drunk, with 5 friends and one tension of waiting. My hostess, Nia, explained that we were at capacity. Vivian looked past her at the line outside and laughed. "Do you know who my husband is?" she asked. Nia glanced at me because I had trained my staff never to argue with wealthy drunks alone. I came to the door in a black blazer and the high heels I used to think Madame looked powerful. "No," I told Vivian. "And tonight, it doesn't matter. We're full." She stared at me as if I had slapped her. "I can buy this place," she said. "Then call me Monday," I said. "Tonight you still need a reservation." The crowd outside went silent. Vivian's face changed. It was not embarrassment exactly. It was something colder. A woman like Vivian did not hear no as a boundary. She heard it as an attack on the natural order of the universe. Grant Cross stepped forward then, calm as a judge. "You're making a mistake," he said. I should have been scared. Maybe I was. But I had my staff behind me, my name on the lease, and a line of customers watching to see whether my door meant anything. "No," I said. "I'm enforcing a rule." Vivian smiled. That was the first time I saw it. That slow, pretty smile with no warmth behind it. The kind of smile that told you she had already decided punishment would be more fun than winning. By Monday morning, a gossip blog had posted an anonymous tip that Blue Mercy was a front for money laundering. By Tuesday afternoon, for corporate events cancelled. By Wednesday, Crosspoint Urban's peer director sent a quiet email to several hospitality investors warning them to avoid reputational exposure connected to my club. By Friday, the health department arrived after what they called a serious complaint. They found no rats. No rotten food. No expired liquor. One inspector even apologized under his breath while taping the notice to my front door. But a closure notice, even for 72 hours, is a stain. In nightlife, reputation is oxygen. Once people think the air is dirty, they stop breathing it. My lenders got nervous. Minority investor backed out of our expansion loan. The landlord stopped answering my calls except through his attorney. Grant Cross's company, I later learned, had already been circling the block for redevelopment. I fought for 9 months. I sold my car. My father sold his auto repair shop in Jackson Heights, the one that still smelled like coffee, motor oil, and old radio baseball. He told me not to cry when he signed the papers. Brick and glass can come back, he said. You can come back. Bidding on the only thing in this family that ever scared me. What's that? I asked. You. But even his faith could not cover the debt. Blue Mercy closed on a Tuesday morning with no music playing. The Copper Bar went at auction. The landlord kept the fixtures. The bank took the house. A week after the foreclosure, I saw Vivian outside a charity luncheon in Midtown. I was coming out of El Galate office with swollen eyes and a folder of bills pressed to my chest. She was stepping from a black SUV in cream silk, one hand on Grant's arm. She recognized me then. She did not say a word. She just lifted her fingers and gave a tiny wave, like she was swatting away a fly. My father saw it from half a block away. He did not move toward her. He did not yell. He simply took my folder from my hands and said, "Remember her face. Not because hate is good for you, but because memory is useful." He died 6 months later, before I could get us out of the apartment above my aunt's laundromat. The doctors said stroke. I said exhaustion. There are many ways powerful people kill you without ever touching your body. For a while, grief made me useless. I worked mornings at a coffee shop, afternoons doing bookkeeping for a catering company, and nights cleaning private event spaces where women like Vivian left lipstick on glasses and called the staff invisible. Every dollar not spent on rent went to one place: information. I learned that revenge was not a scream. It was a spreadsheet. Crosspoint Urban had overextended itself. Grant loved buying buildings with borrowed money and selling investors the fantasy that every neighborhood could become a luxury campus. St. Harbor, Vivian's favorite club and unofficial throne room, sat inside a landmark building owned by a holding company with 3 silent partners, 2 lawsuits, and 1 balloon payment nobody wanted to talk about. St. Harbor's liquor license depended on a small distributor whose owner owed money to Approvate lender. The club's operating company had unpaid vendor invoices hidden behind brand partnership credits. The building's mortgage had been packaged, resold, and neglected by men who thought paper was boring until paper owned them. I did not have Grant's money. I did not have Vivian's name. But I had patience, and I had people who were tired of being stepped on. My old bartender introduced me to a retired bankruptcy attorney named Lenora Price, who had once represented half the restaurants in Brooklyn and trusted nobody who wore loafers without socks. Nia, my former hostess, now worked at a boutique PR agency and knew exactly which influencers Vivian paid under the table. My father's old friend, Mr. Alvarez, had a nephew at a small lender holding pieces of St. Harbor's debt. I spent 18 months becoming boring to my enemies. I dyed my dark hair a softer brown. I stopped wearing eyeliner. I removed my old photos from social media. I applied to St. Harbor Escote Check because it was the one position rich people looked at least while saying the most. Paul hired me after a 7-minute interview. "Can you handle rude customers?" he asked. I almost laughed. "I've had practice," I said. For 2 years, I stood behind that counter and became part of the wallpaper. I learned who tipped and who pretended to tip. I learned which councilman came in through the kitchen and which banker cried in the bathroom after midnight. I learned that Grant Cross did not love Vivian, but he loved the way she performed wealth. She made his money look old. He made her cruelty look protected. Vivian came in every weekend. Sometimes she ignored him. Sometimes she used me for sport. Don't wrinkle that, coat girl. Try not to smell like fryer oil when you touch the sleeves. Do they let you people keep cash tips, or does Paul collect them in a sad little jar? Once, she threw a wet umbrella at me and said, "Catch, before the floor thinks it's a shelter." Another time, she told a server named Maya, who was 7 months pregnant, that waddling was bad for the brand. Maya cried in the storage room. I held her hand until she could breathe. That night, I added Vivian's comment to a folder labeled Conduct. The folder grew fat. There was Mike, the security guard she threatened to have fired because he asked her friend to stop vaping near the curtains. There was Tasha, the bartender Vivian called community college champagne. There was Sarah, a law student working nights, who once had hot espresso spilled across her wrist because Vivian said the cup was too working class. Sarah did not sue. Shed the job. Most people need the job. That is what people like Vivian count on. Every humiliation became data. Every insult became a witness. Every night I smiled at the woman who ruined me, I bought another inch of the floor beneath her feet. By the time Vivian's white fox coat cut my cheek, the final deal was 2 hours from closing. At 2:19 a.m., while Vivian laughed in the VIP lounge and Grant took a call near the back hallway, my phone buzzed under the counter. Lenora, debt transfer confirmed. License control executed. Real property assignment pending final wire. Midnight tomorrow for operational authority. Midnight tomorrow. Vivian raised her glass from the stairs. Coat girl, she shouted. Fresh napkin. This one has spots, like your face. People laughed because laughing was easier than risking her attention. I took a linen napkin from the stack, walked up the first 3 stairs, and handed it to her. Her eyes flicked to the thin blood drying on my cheek. Don't drip on my shoes, she said. I leaned close enough for only her to hear me. Enjoy tomorrow night, Mrs. Cross. Her smile thinned. Why? Because some floors change owners without making a sound. She stared at me for a second, then laughed in my face. You people watch too many movies. Maybe we did. But in movies, revenge usually comes with thunder, guns, screaming, and impossible timing. Mine came with signatures, wire transfers, city permits, employee affidavits, debt assignments, vendor notices, and a woman so arrogant she did not think the person hanging her coat could count. The next night was supposed to be Vivian Cross's coronation. Saint Harbor had been closed to the public for Grant's private celebration, the announcement of Crosspoint Urban's merger with a West Coast investment platform that would, according to the press release, redefine lifestyle real estate through community-driven hospitality experiences. In plain English, it meant Grant was about to make himself richer by selling investors' Aperture version of displacement. There were 400 guests on the list. Entertainment reporters, real estate influencers, council donors, startup founders who spoke like TED Talks, 2 former athletes, 1 senator's son, women in dresses that cost more than my father's first house, men who knew how to say working families on camera and rent pressure in private. Vivian had planned every visible inch of it. The floral installation over the bar was white orchids and black calla lilies. Thesta Pan repeat wall had Grant's company logo repeated in gold. The VIP level was reserved for founding circle guests, which meant people Vivian liked or feared. There was supposed to be vintage champagne, a raw bar, a jazz trio for the first hour, and a DJ afterward. Paul looked ill when I arrived at 4 p.m. Isabel, he said, tugging at his collar. We're missing 2 champagne deliveries, the florist says. The second invoice bounced, and the inspection guy called about a structural note on the east balcony. That sounds stressful, I said. He stared at me. Why are you calm? I hung my coat behind the counter. Maybe I've had practice with stressful nights. He did not know yet. Most of them did not. That was the rule. Lenora insisted on it. Control first, reveal second. Rich people were best handled after the door was already locked. The first move happened at 7:12 p.m., before the guests even entered. Grant's black Maserati pulled up to the valet stand, headlights sliding across wet pavement. It had rained all afternoon, and the street outside Saint Harbor reflected the club lights like broken jewelry. The valet, a nervous 22-year-old named Cody, looked down at his tablet and froze. Grant lowered his window. Problem? Cody swallowed. I'm sorry, Mr. Cross. The system says your vehicle is restricted. My vehicle is what? Restricted for insurance exposure. I'm not authorized to accept it. Grant stared at him. This is my event. I understand, sir. I pay this club. I was standing near the coat check doorway, close enough to hear but not close enough to be blamed. Not tonight, I said softly. Grant's eyes moved to me. For once, here I looked. Not with recognition, not yet, but with irritation, like a stain had spoken. Paul rushed outside. Mr. Cross, I am so sorry. Let me call corporate. Cody's tablet pinged. He read the message and went even paler. I'm sorry, sir. The restriction stands. There are many ways to humble a powerful man. Making him park his own car 4 blocks away in Italian shoes during a rainstorm is one of the smaller ones, but it has a clean flavor. Grant did not yell. He drove off with his jaw tight enough to crack stone. Vivian arrived 6 minutes later in a hired SUV with 2 photographers she had pretended not to hire. When she stepped out, the cameras flashed. She wore a silver dress with a neckline sharpenado looked dangerous and a white silk wrap over her shoulders. Where's Grant? She asked Paul. Paul looked toward the street. He had a small valet issue. Vivian's smile twitched. Fix it. The second move happened at the bar. At 8 p.m., Vivian swept inside with her friends, her hired photographers, and the air of a woman entering a room built to applaud her. She handed me her silk wrap without looking at my face. Don't close this, she said. It's vintage. I'll treat it according to its value, I said. She paused, suspicious, but a donor's wife called her name and she turned away. At 8:34, Vivian ordered the first champagne tower. Tasha, behind the bar, looked at the tablet, then at me. I gave her the smallest nod. Tasha turned back to Vivian. I'm sorry, Mrs. Cross. We don't have the vintage Cristal tonight. Vivian blinked. Of course you do. I approved it. The distributor suspended premium deliveries due to an unresolved account balance. The word balance hit the air like a bad smell. Vivian leaned forward. Then open the Dom. We don't have Dom either. Then what exactly do you have? Tasha set a bottle on the bar. California Sparkling. It's actually pretty good. Vivian stared at it as if Tasha had placed roadkill on the marble. Do I look like I celebrate a merger with grocery store Bubbles? A few people nearby pretended not to hear. Their pretending made it worse. Grant arrived at 8:41 with wet cuffs and mud on one shoe. Vivian saw him and hissed, Your car? Not now, he said. My champagne? Not now. Don't not now me in front of these people. He leaned close. Smile. She did, instantly. That was the thing about Vivian. Her cruelty was natural, but so was performance. She could turn humiliation into a camera angle if she saw the lens in time. The third move waited upstairs. At 9:05, the VIP level was supposed to open for Founding Circle guests. Instead, Mike and two security staff placed black stanchions across the staircase and aproned sign at the base. East balcony temporarily closed for safety review. Vivian read it once. Then again. Then she turned toward Paul. What is this? Paul's forehead glistened. There was a structural note from the building assessment. We cannot allow guests up there tonight. My table is up there. I know. My donors are up there. I know. My photographers are supposed to shoot me from up there. I understand. No, Paul, you don't understand anything. I am the reason this place exists. Mike shifted at stairs. He had worked security in clubs for 18 years and had the exhausted patience of a man who knew everybody became honest when drunk. Vivian snapped her fingers at him, move the rope. Mike did not move. She laughed once, sharp and ugly. Did you not hear me? I heard you, he said. Then move it. I can't. I'll have you fired before midnight. For the first time in 2 years, Mike looked at me instead of Paul. I nodded. Mike looked back at Vivian. No, ma'am, he said. You won't. That was when the room changed. Not obviously. Not enough for the cameras. But the staff felt it. Tasha stood a little straighter. Cody stopped staring at the floor. Sarah, carrying a tray of appetizers, slowed near the bar and watched Vivian with a look he had never seen on her face before. Hope is dangerous when it first enters a room. It makes people reckless. I had to keep them steady. Not yet, I whispered to Sarah as she passed. She looked at me with shining eyes. Is it true? Midnight, I said. Her fingers tightened around the tray. Vivian saw the exchange. What are you two whispering about? She demanded. Sarah looked at her. Not down. Not away. At her. The shrimp, Sarah said. Vivian's mouth opened. Sarah walked away. It was small. It was nothing. It was everything. By 10 p.m., the event was limping. Not dead, not yet, but wounded in all the places rich people hated: optics, comfort, control. The champagne was wrong. The VIP level was closed. Grant had mud on his shoes. A council donor's wife had asked too loudly why the community-driven hospitality platform could not settle a liquor invoice. A gossip columnist in emerald satin had stopped drinking and started watching. Grant cornered Paul near the service hallway. What the hell is going on? Paul looked trapped between fear and unemployment. I'm trying to get answers. From who? Before Paul could answer, my phone buzzed again. Lenora, final wire confirmed. Operational control transfers at 12 a.m. documents queued. Be ready. My throat went dry. For 2 years, I had imagined that message. I thought I would feel joy. Instead, I felt me father's hand on my shoulder, heavy and warm, and the ghost smell of his garage after rain. You can come back. At 10:27, Vivian came to the coat check. Not walked. Came like weather. She had been drinking the California Sparkling she claimed to despise. Her cheeks were flushed, but her eyes were clear in the way mean drunk people's eyes can be clear. She carried another coat, this one silver-gray mink, heavier than the White Fox, lined in red silk. She threw it across the counter so hard the hanger rack behind me rattled. The clasp caught my cheek again, this time lower, reopening the cut. Blood touched my collar. Oops, she said. Clumsy me. Her friends gathered behind her. Grant was not there. Paul was, and he already looked beaten. Hang it, Vivian said. And check the pockets. Actually, don't. You might be tempted. I did not touch the coat. She waited. I looked down at the first spread across the counter like an animal that had died for the wrong woman. Then I looked at Vivian. No, the word was quiet, but somehow every sound around us seemed to make room for it. Vivian smiled slowly. I'm sorry? I sighed no. Paul closed his eyes. Isabel, please. Vivian turned on him. Fire her. Vivian, Paul said, voice shaking, tonight is complicated. Fire her, or I call Grant. I almost felt sorry for Paul. Almost. He had never been the villain. He was the kind of man who survived bending and then called it professionalism. Vivian snapped her fingers toward Mike, remove her. Mike stepped closer. His face was unreadable. Vivian pointed at me. Now. Mike folded his arms. No, ma'am. Her smile fell off. What did you say? I said no. Have you all lost your minds? The clock over the bar read 10:31. Not yet. Not legally, not fully. But close enough for thunder to start in my bones. Vivian leaned across the counter. You little nobody, she said. I don't know what drugstore confidence you found tonight, but let me explain something. People like you do not say no to people like me. You take the coat. You say thank you. You go back to the dark little corner where we keep you so nobody has to think about your life. There it was. The room heard it. The cameras near the bar caught it. Sarah stopped walking. Tasha put both hands flat on the counter. Cody stared through the glass doors from outside. I reached under the coat check counter and took out a black envelope. Vivian laughed. What is that, your resignation? No, I said. Yours. I placed the envelope on top of her silver coat. She did not open it. Paul did. His hands trembled as he pulled out the first page. His eyes moved across the letterhead. Then his face changed so completely that Vivian stepped back. What? She snapped. What is it? Paul looked at me. For the first time since he hired me, he said my full name. Ms. Vale? Vivian went still. Not because she knew the name. Not yet. But because Paul's voice had used respect, and she understood respect as currency. I took off my brass name tag and set it beside the envelope. My name is Isabel Vale, I said. I am no longer coat check. Grant appeared at the edge of the crowd, phony in hand. What is happening? The lights above the bar dimmed slightly. The DJ, who had been warned to watch for my signal, lowered the music until the bass became a heartbeat. I looked at Grant, then Vivian. What is happening, I said, is that Crosspoint Urban picked the wrong woman's business to destroy. Vivian's face flickered. She knew me then, not fully. Not in detail. But enough. I saw recognition crawl across her eyes like a stain spreading through water. No, she said. Yes. You ran that filthy little club. I owned Blue Mercy. Grant's expression tightened. Vivian laughed too loudly. This is absurd. Paul, end this. Paul looked at the papers again. I can't. Why not? I answered. Because at midnight, the building, the operating debt, the vendor rights, and the liquor license control move under Vale Meridian Holdings. My company. The words landed slowly. Rich people often need a moment to understand that reality can happen without their permission. Vivian looked at Grant. Tell her she's insane. Grant did not answer. His phone buzzed. Then buzzed again. He looked down. His face lost color. At 10:35 p.m., the first legal notice hit his inbox. At 10:36, the second went to the club's corporate address. At 10:37, Vivian's PR consultant received a copy. At 10:38, the private lender holding the original note confirmed transfer. The gossip columnist in emerald satin lifted her phone. I did not smile. Not yet. Enjoy the next 82 minutes, I said. They're the last 82 minutes you'll ever spend pretending this room belongs to you. The 82 minutes before midnight were the longest of my life. Vivian tried everything. First, she tried denial. This is fake, she told anyone close enough to hear. Some disgruntled employee printed fake documents. Then she tried power. Grant, call Arthur. Call Themir's office. Call the liquor authority. Call somebody who matters. Grant called 6 people. I knew because I watched him from behind the coat check counter while his voice grew quieter with each call. Men like Grant do not panic all at once. They shrink in stages. Then Vivian tried charm. She approached the gossip columnist with olive so brittle it could cut glass. You know how clubs are, she said. Drama makes the staff feel important. The columnist smiled politely and kept recording. Then Vivian tried fear. She cornered Sarah near the kitchen doors. You think she can protect you? Vivian hissed. When this is over, I'll make sure nobody in this city hires you to carry water. Sarah's face went pale, but she did not back up. I stepped beside her. When this is over, I said, Sarah will still have a job. You'll have a defamation suit. Vivian's eyes burned into me. You have no idea how ugly I can make this. I almost laughed. Vivian, ugly is where I've been living since you waved at me outside that charity luncheon. That hit her. Not because she felt guilt. Because she realized I remembered. At 11:04, Grant pulled me into the service hallway. He did not ask. He placed a hand near my elbow, not gripping, just guiding, with the entitled confidence of a manist to moving people through space. I looked at his hand. He removed it. "Isabel," he said, voice low. "Let's not make this theatrical. You held a merger party in a nightclub built on the body of my old business. Theater was already involved." He inhaled through his nose. "What do you want?" It was a clean question. Honest, finally, not because he respected me, but because he had done the math and realized I had something could not instantly buy. For 2 years, I had fantasized about this moment. I had imagined asking for impossible sums. Public apologies. Ruin. I had imagined his knees hitting the floor. I had imagined Vivian sobbing, diamonds shaking at her throat, but standing there in the service hallway, with staff pretending not to listen and my cheek still stinging. What I wanted felt sharper than money. I want the truth where everyone can hear it. His face went hard. "No, then enjoy midnight. You're making a mistake." I looked at him and suddenly I was back at my own door 2 years earlier, hearing the same sentence from the same man in a better suit. "No," I said. "I'm enforcing a rule." At 11:21, the night took its first turn I had not planned. Nia arrived. I had not invited her to come in person. She was supposed to monitor social media from her apartment, ready to release documents if Vivian's team tried to bury the story. But there she was, stepping through the side door in a black coat, hair pulled back, face pale with urgency. She went straight to me. "We found the payment." My stomach tightened. What payment? Not just the blog. Not just the inspector. She handed me her phone. "Grant's office paid a crisis consultant 2 years ago. Same day as the anonymous money laundering tip. The consultant's invoice says competitor neutralization." The hallway tilted. I knew Vivian had started it. I knew Grant had joined. But this was different. This was not a drunk socialite punishing a door girl with a business. This was a corporate operation. A strategy. My father's shop. My club. My home. My father's last year under impossible stress. Neutralization. That was the word they used for my life. Grant saw my face. "What is that?" he asked. I turned the phone toward him. For the first time all night, he looked truly afraid. "Where did you get that?" Nia smiled without warmth. "From a woman in your PR department who got tired of cleaning blood off rich people's shoes." Grant lunged for the phone. Mike appeared between us so fast the air moved. "Don't," Mike said. Grant stopped. Nia looked at me. "There's more." The consultant kept audio. My heart slammed once. "Audio of what?" Nia pressed play. Vivian's voice came through the tiny speaker, laughing. "She needs to learn that cute little neighborhood clubs don't embarrass women like me. Make it look regulatory. Dirty kitchen, laundering rumor, something sticky. Grant says investors hate sticky." Then Grant's voice, lower, bored. "The property is useful if her lease collapses. Don't overdo it. We need sympathy, not a corpse." I heard somebody gasp. It might have been Sarah. It might have been me. "We need sympathy, not a corpse." The hallway was silent. Grant whispered, "That's illegally obtained." I looked at him. That's what guilty men say when evidence has good lighting. At 11:40, Vivian returned to the coat check with the silver coat still lying where she had thrown it. She had decided a known final performance. The music stopped completely. Not by my signal this time. The DJ saw Vivian climb onto the small platform near the bar and panicked. "Ladies and gentlemen," she called, lifting a glass. "I am so sorry for the little labor dispute interrupting our celebration." A few nervous laughs. She smiled beautifully. "You all know him. You know Grant. You know what we've built for this city. And I think you can all recognize what happens when resentment dresses itself up as ambition." Her eyes found me. Some people fail, and instead of learning from it, they blame everyone who succeeded. Something inside me went very still. She raised her glass higher. "So tonight, let's toast to builders. Not victims. Not bitter ex-owners. Builders." Grant closed his eyes like he knew she had just walked onto thin ice with a torch. The clock read 11:47. I walked to the center of the room. Every camera followed. "Vivian," I said, "thank you." She blinked. "For what?" "For giving me the last thing you needed." At 11:48, the main screen behind the bar changed. The Crosspoint logo vanished. In its place appeared a blue door with copper lettering. "Blue Mercy." The room murmured. Vivian's smile cracked. The first slide was the gossip post that had accused my club of money laundering. The second was an email from Vivian's assistant to the blogger. The third was a payment record to the crisis consultant. The fourth was a transcript of Vivian's audio. "Make it look regulatory." The fifth slide was Grant's voice, transcribed in white letters on a black screen. "The property is useful if her lease collapses." Nobody spoke. Not the investors. Not the influencers. Not the donor wives. Not the men with perfect pocket squares and bloodless smiles. I stood under the screen and felt my father's absence like a hand squeezing my lungs. My name is Isabel Vale, I said. 2 years ago, I owned a nightclub called Blue Mercy. I refused Vivian cross-entry because we were at legal capacity. In response, she and her husband helped manufacture a reputational attack, pressure investors, trigger regulatory scrutiny, and collapse my business. Vivian shouted, "Liar." I clicked the remote. Her own voice filled the room. She needs to learn. The word learn echoed off the marble. Vivian grabbed Grant's arm. Do something? Grant did not move. The next slide showed staff complaints from Saint Harbor. 31 of them. Redacted names where needed, dates where not. A valet shoved into a door for misplacing a scarf. A bartender threatened over a drink garnish. A pregnant server mocked in front of guests. Sarah's burn report. Mike's written statement. Tasha's audio. Paul's incident logs, Theon's he thought he had buried in a private folder. Lenora had found them during operational due diligence. Paul had cried when she showed him the printouts. Sarah stepped forward before I asked her to. My name is Sarah Coleman, she said, voice shaking but clear. I worked here because law school is expensive. Mrs. Cross spilled hot espresso on my wrist and told me pain builds character. I did not report it because I needed rent. Tasha came next. I'm Tasha Reed. She called me trash with a cocktail shaker. That's not colorful language. That's abuse. Mike stood by the door. I'm Mike Donnelly. I've worked security 18 years. I've removed drunk men twice her size with more manners. A low sound moved through the room. Not applause. Not outrage yet. Something gathering. Vivian looked smaller on the platform now. Still beautiful, still rich, still wrapped in silver, but smaller. A woman finally separated from the lighting crew of her own myth. Grant stepped toward me. Turn it off, he said. No, this is a private event. In a building you no longer control. It is not midnight. I looked at the clock. 11:59, the room held its breath. Then, from behind the bar, the screen shifted to a legal notice. Property and operations transfer effective 12 a.m. New management, Vale Meridian Holdings. The clock changed .12:00. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then every light in the club adjusted. The gold wash faded. The harsh VIP spotlights went dark. The house lights rose just enough for everyone to see everyone else clearly. No shadows for Vivian. No flattering angle for Grant. Just people, witnesses, and the floor. I turned to Paul. Please remove the crosspoint step and repeat. Paul stared at me. Then he moved. 2 staff members followed him. The gold logo wall came down in sections, folding like cheap cardboard. Behind it was bare brick. The symbolism was almost too perfect, but I had not planned that part. Sometimes a building understands revenge better than people do. Grant's phone exploded with calls. He looked at the screen, then at me, then at the investors watching him. One of them, a woman with white hair and a diamond pin shaped like a bee, spoke first. Grant, she said, is that recording real? Grant said nothing. That is an answer, she said, and walked out while already dialing. Another investor followed. Then a third. Vivian climbed down from the platform. This is defamation, she said, but her voice had lost its blade. Lenora entered through the side door at exactly 12:03 in a navy suit and shoes that sounded like punctuation. She was 67, barely 5 feet tall, and looked like she had personally evicted the devil twice. No, Lenora said. Defamation requires falsehood, what we have is documentation. Vivian looked at her. Who are you? Her attorney. Grant rubbed a hand over his mouth. Isabel, we can settle this. You always could have, I said. You chose to crush instead. Vivian snapped, for God's sake, it was 2 years ago. You lost a club. People lose businesses every day. That was the sentence that broke the room, not the recordings. Not the documents. Because everyone heard what she meant, you were supposed to stay lost. I walked toward the coat check counter and picked up her silver coat. For a moment, the old reflex almost returned. Hang it. Protect it. Don't make trouble. Be grateful. Instead, I dropped it gently at her feet. Pick it up. Her face twisted. What? Pick up your coat. I am not your employee. No, I said, and I was never your property. The silence was brutal. Vivian looked around for rescue. Grant would not meet her eyes. Her friends stared at their phones. The photographers she had hired were recording the wrong humiliation. Pick it up, I said again. Her lips parted. For 2 years, I had carried the weight of her power. Her lies. Her smile outside the charity luncheon. Her voice in my head every time I counted tips in a laundromat apartment. Now the weight was on the floor between us. Vivian bent. Slowly. Her dress tightened at the knees. One diamond earring swung forward. Her fingers touched the fur. She lifted the coat, and dust from the floor clung to the silver fibers. Somebody clapped. It was Sarah. Then Tasha. Then Cody from the entrance. Then Mike. Then the sound spread, rough and angry and alive. Staff first, then guests who had spent years watching people like Vivian mistreat workers and call it personality. The applause was not elegant. It was not polite. It was a door slamming open. Vivian stood in the middle of it with her dirty coat in her arms. She looked at me with pure hate. "You're still just the coat check girl." I nodded. "And you're still a woman who needs other people to open doors for her." I turned to Mike. "Please escort Mr. and Mrs. Cross out through the main entrance." Vivian's eyes widened. "The main entrance?" "Yes. We have photographers outside." "I know." Grant finally spoke. "Isabel, don't." That almost made me smile. The man who helped destroy my life was asking me for discretion. 2 years ago, I said, you taught me the value of public perception. Mike and 2 guards moved in. They did not touch Vivian. They did not have to. The crowd parted, not for royalty now, but for removal. Vivian walked first, clutching the silver coat. Grant followed, phone still buzzing. At the front door, he reached for her elbow, then seemed to think better of it and let his hand fall. That tiny gesture did more damage than anything I could have staged. Vivian noticed. So did the cameras. Outside, rain still tapped against the awning. Their hired photographers lifted cameras automatically. The gossip columnist stood behind them with her phone raised. Vivian tried to cover her face with the coat. Mike opened the door. "Good night, Mrs. Cross," he said. She stepped into the rain. Grant paused at the threshold and looked back at me. There was anger there, yes. Fear too. But under both was something like confusion. Men like Grant do not understand people who cannot be bought once they have lost everything worth selling. "What do you want this to become?" he asked. I thought of Blue Mercy. My father's garage. Nia standing outside in the rain the night we closed. Sarah hiding her burned wrist. Maya crying in the storage room. Paul bending until his spine became policy. Every worker who had ever smiled because rent was due. Consequences, I said. Then the door closed. The fall did not happen all at once. Movies like to make revenge look immediate, but real consequences arrive through inboxes, board meetings, legal filings, donors distancing themselves, and people who suddenly remember they always had concerns. By 8 a.m., the first video had 2 million views. By noon, Vivian's name was trending with the phrase "coat check queen," which I did not love but could not stop. By 3 p.m., 4 former St. Harbor employees had contacted Lenora with statements. By dinner, 11 more. Within 48 hours, Sarah's burn report had become part of a formal workplace complaint. Tasha organized staff testimony. Mike provided security logs. Paul, to his credit, turned over incident notes that made him look weak but told the truth. Grant's merger did not close. The West Coast Investment Platform issued a statement about pausing due diligence pending review of reputational and governance concerns. That sentence was corporate language for everyone saw the video. Crosspoint Urban's board opened an internal investigation into payments made to the crisis consultant. A junior peer employee leaked emails confirming that the attack on Blue Mercy had been discussed as market friction management. That phrase became another headline. Vivian was removed from the board of 2 women's entrepreneurship charities by Thursday. The irony did not need explaining, though the internet explained it anyway. She tried to release an apology video from her kitchen. It was 4 minutes long, filmed in soft daylight, with no makeup and a cream sweater meant to whisper humility. She said she was heartbroken by how events were interpreted. She said she had always respected working people. She said stress, grief, alcohol, and public pressure had distorted the truth. She did not say my name. The comments did. Grant's apology was shorter and worse. He referred to competitive actions taken during a complicated period of expansion. Lenora watched it twice, then looked at me. He talks like a man trying not to confess while confessing. Can we use it? She smiled. Oh, honey. We can frame it. I did not reopen St. Harbor immediately. I closed it for 5 weeks. The first day after the crosses were removed, the staff came in expecting chaos. Some thought I would fire everyone. Some thought I would sell the place and vanish. People who work for unstable owners learn to expect punishment when power changes hands. I gathered them on the empty dance floor at 11 a.m., when clubs look their saddest. No music, no perfume, no lights hiding the stains. Just scuffed floors, tired faces, and half a dozen people waiting to see what kind of boss I would become after revenge. My name is Isabel Vale, I said. Some of you know parts of what happened to me. Some of you do not. But this place is changing. Nobody spoke. The name St. Harbor is finished. Tasha whispered, good. A few people laughed. I continued. If you want to stay, you'll be offered new contracts. Wages increase starting this week, tip distribution becomes transparent. Abuse from guests gets documented and enforced. Noon is required to tolerate being touched, insulted, threatened, or humiliated to protect a bottle service minimum. Cody raised his hand like he was in school. What if the guest is famous? Especially then. That got the first real smile. Sarah stood near the bar with her wrist scar visible under her sleeve. What about Vivian? She asked. She is permanently banned. Mike folded his arms and nodded once. Paul stood in the back, looking like a man expecting a sentence. I looked at him. Paul, you enabled things you should have stopped. He lowered his head. I know. You also kept records. I was scared. I know that too. His eyes lifted. I'm offering you assistant manager under Tasha for 90 days, I said. You learn to protect staff before donors, or you leave. Tasha's eyebrows shot up. Under me? You have a problem with that? She tried not to smile. No, Paul looked at her, then at me. I'll earn it. I hope so. The renovation was not glamorous. We ripped out the greasy velvet couches and replaced the VIP throne with regular seating. The east balcony got real repairs, not decorative lies. The old gold logo came down. It painted the entrance matte black and the inside a deep blue so dark it almost remembered Me First Club for me. I found a craftsman in Queens to build a copper bar front from salvaged metal. He was 73 and had known my father. Your dad fixed my transmission in 1998, he said. Charged me half because my kid was sick. He refused full payment. I paid him anyway, then cried in my car for 20 minutes. Nia handled the relaunch quietly. No influencer circus. No fake exclusivity. No sponsored champagne towers. Just a clean announcement, a new club, worker-owned tip transparency, live music, strict conduct rules, and a door policy that cared more about behavior than status. We named it Mercy House. It hot about calling it Blue Mercy again, but something in me resisted. Blue Mercy belonged to the woman I had been before Vivian taught me how far people could go to punish a boundary. Mercy House belonged to the woman who came back knowing kindness needed rules and doors needed locks. The night before reopening, I sat alone in the office. My father's photo was on the desk. He was standing in front of his garage, wiping his hands on a red rag, smiling like the world was difficult but still worth arguing with. Beside the photo was a note he had written years earlier on the back of a parts invoice. If you ever burn a bridge, make sure you are standing on the side with water. I touched the paper. I didn't burn it, Dad, I whispered. I bought the river. The reopening line wrapped around the block. Not because we were exclusive. Because people had seen the story and wanted to stand in a room where someone like Vivian had finally been told no. Some came for the drama. Some came for the music. Some came because they had work service jobs and wanted to clap with their wallets. Some came because they were nosy. Andy was not above benefiting from nosiness. Sarah wore a black suit and checked IDs with Mike for the first hour just because she wanted to see the door from the other side. Tasha ran the bar like a general. Paul wore a plain shirt, no ego, and asked staff twice if anyone needed a break. At 10 p.m., the jazz trio started. The first trumpet note rose into the room, warm and bruised, and for a second I was back in Blue Mercy before everything fell apart. Nia found me near the stairs. You okay? No, she linked her arm through mine. Good no or bad no? Big no. She understood. Around midnight, a woman in a red dress snapped her fingers at Cody because her table was not ready. He looked nervous. I walked over. Can I help? She gave me the up and down look I knew too well. I know the owner. I smiled. So do I. Her expression faltered. The rule is simple, I said, pointing to the sign by the entrance. Be kind or leave. She rolled her eyes, but her friend touched her arm. Let it go, the friend whispered. This is that place. That place? I liked the sound of that. Months passed. The lawsuit against Vivian and Grant became slower and less cinematic, which meant it was real. There were depositions. Motions. Delays. Grant's attorneys argued that business decisions were not personal attacks. Vivian's attorneys argued that her comments were social exaggeration. Lenora argued like a woman sharpening knives with footnotes. Then came the second twist I had not expected. The health inspector who had closed Blue Mercy requested a meeting. His name was Daniel Reeves. I remembered him from the day he taped the closure notice to my door, remembered the way he had avoided my eyes and whispered sorry. He arrived at Lenora's office with a folder, a gray face, and hands that would not stop moving. I should have come forward earlier, he said. Lenora said nothing. He placed the folder on the table. Inside were emails. Notes. A record of pressure from a deputy commissioner who had golfed with Grant. A flagged complaint that should have been dismissed. A handwritten note from Daniel, no violation supporting emergency closure. My voice barely worked. You knew? Hell looked at me. I knew it was wrong. I told myself 72 hours wouldn't destroy you. The room went very quiet. Daniel swallowed. I was wrong. Anger came first. It rose so fast I had to grip the table. My father sold his shop, I said. We lost our house. I know. No, you don't. He nodded, tears in his eyes. No. I don't. Lenora leaned forward. Why now? Daniel looked down. My daughter saw the video. She's 19. She asked me if I had ever done something like that to somebody. His voice broke. I lied to her. Then I couldn't sleep. His testimony changed everything. It connected Vivian's cruelty, Grant's strategy, and government pressure into one ugly chain. Not rumor. Not internet drama. A chain. The civil case strengthened. The city opened an internal review. The deputy commissioner resigned to spend more time with family, which is what powerful men say when the family has not requested more time. Grant's board removed him as CEO 3 weeks later. Vivian filed for separation 12 days after that. Not divorce, at first. Separation. A word rich people use when they want to keep options and jewelry. I thought I would feel triumphant. Instead, I felt tired. That is the secret people do not tell you about revenge. Even when it works, it does not give back the years. It does not resurrect your father. It does not unmake the nights you ate crackers over a sink because sitting down would make you cry. It does not return the version of you who trusted rules to protect decent people. But it can build a fence around the future. And sometimes that is enough. One cold evening in February, Vivian came back. Not through the front door. She knew better than that. She came to the alley entrance during a private rehearsal, wearing dark glasses, a camel coat, and the kind of plain baseball cap that rich women think makes them invisible while still costing $400. Mike saw her on the camera first. He came to my office. She's outside. I knew who he meant. For a moment, I considered letting him handle it. Then I stood. The alley smelled like rain and old cardboard. Vivian stood beneath the security light, thinner than before, her hair tucked under the cap. Without the cameras and the friends and the diamonds performing around her, she looked almost ordinary. Almost. Your band, I said. Her mouth tightened. I'm not here to come in. Then why are you here? She looked toward the street. Grant is going to say it was all me. I waited. He's going to claim I pushed him into it. The complaint. The blogger. The consultant. Alafit. Did you? Her eyes snapped back to mine. He wanted the building. And you wanted me punished. She looked away. There it was. Not remorse. Not apology. But recognition of the shape of the truth. I have emails, she said. Text messages. Recordings. If I give them to you, I want my name removed from the staff complaint settlement. I almost laughed. Even ruined, Vivian negotiated like a knife. No, her face hardened. You haven't even seen what I have. I said no to the condition, not the evidence. You need it. Maybe. Then don't be stupid. I stepped closer. Vivian, 2 years ago I said no to you at a door, and you helped burn down my life. I have spent every day since learning the cost of letting people like you confuse access with ownership. You can give me the evidence because Grant deserves consequences, or you can keep it and let him bury you. But you do not get to buy your way out of what you did to my staff. She stared at me for a long time. Then something in her face shifted. Not softness. Vivian did not soften. It was more like the collapse of an old calculation. My mother was a housekeeper, she said suddenly. It did not respond. She cleaned apartments on Park Avenue. I used to sit in laundry rooms doing homework while women walked past us like we were furniture. She laughed once, bitter and small. I promised myself nobody would ever look through me again. For a second, I saw it. The wound under the armor. The scared girl who had mistaken cruelty for distance from her own humiliation. It did not excuse anything. Pain explains. It does not absolve. You became the women who ignored her, I said. Vivian flinched like I had struck her. Then she reached into her coat and took out a flash drive. No conditions? I asked. Her jaw worked. No conditions. I took it. Why? She looked at the black door behind me, the sign, the line of light where music leaked into the alley. Because Grant always thought he was smarter than me, she said, and because you were right. About what? Her eyes lifted to mine. The people at the door can close it. Then she walked away. The flash drive did not save Vivian. It did not erase her part. But it exposed Grant completely. There were messages proving he had targeted Blue Mercy because the property blocked Mataretto a redevelopment package. There was audio of him telling the consultant to make the founder radioactive. There were documents showing Crosspoint had projected profit from distressed acquisition after my lease failed. Make the founder radioactive. Another phrase for my life. The settlement arrived 7 months after the night of the coat. It was not the biggest number the internet imagined. Real legal outcomes rarely match comment section fantasies. But it was enough to pay my remaining debts, fund a staff emergency account at Mercy House, and buy back one thing I thought was gone forever. The Queen's house. The bank had sold it to a landlord who rented it badly and fixed nothing. The porch sagged. The kitchen tiles were cracked. The maple tree out front had grown wild over the walkway. But when Lenora handed me the keys, my knees almost gave out. Nia came with me. So did Sarah, Tasha, Mike, and even Paul. We stood in the empty living room where my father used to watch baseball too loudly and argue with umpires who could not hear him. Dust floated in the afternoon light. I walked to the kitchen doorway and pressed my hand against the frame. There was still a little notch where my father had measured my height when I was 11. "You got it back," Sarah whispered. I shook my head. "No," I said. "We did." That night, I brought my father's photo from the club office and placed it on the mantel. For the first time in years, I slept in the house where I had learned how to be stubborn. I wish I could say I never thought about Vivian again, but that would be a lie. Power leaves fingerprints. So does humiliation. Sometimes, at 2 in the morning, when the club smells like perfume, spilled bourbon, citrus peel, raincoats, and desperate ambition, I still feel the ghost of that fur clasp cutting me cheek. I still hear her voice telling me people like me belonged in dark corners. Then I look around. At Tasha laughing behind the copper bar. At Sarah studying case law during slow hours because she is 1 year from becoming the kind of attorney who scares men like Grant. At Mike training new security staff to protect the room without becoming bullies. At the sign by the door. Be kind or leave. At the coat check rack, where every jacket, wrap, scarf, and fur is handled carefully, not because the owners are rich, but because care is a choice we make for ourselves. People still ask if revenge healed me. It did not. Revenge is not medicine. It is surgery. It cuts out what is killing you, but you still have to learn how to live with the scar. What healed me was building something after. Paying people fairly. Saying no and surviving it. Buying back my father's house. Watching workers stand upright in a room where they used to shrink. And maybe, if I am honest, what healed me was the memory of Vivian bending down to pick up her own coat. Not because she was humiliated. Because in that moment, the world corrected itself by 1 inch. And sometimes 1 inch is where justice begins. Last month, a young woman came to Mercy House without a reservation. She was dressed carefully, nervously, like someone trying to look like she belonged somewhere she had never been. The host explained we were at capacity. The woman's face fell. I was nearby. For half a second, the old scene tried to repeat itself in my bones. Door. No. Power. Punishment. The young woman swallowed and said, "Okay. I understand. Could I wait?" I smiled. "Yes," I said. "You can wait." She did. 20 minutes later, a table opened. She tipped the host $20 and thanked the bartender by name. That is the difference. Not everyone outside a door is Vivian. Not every no becomes a war. Not every person with money is cruel. But every room reveals itself by what happens when someone does not get what they want. Vivian wanted a throne. Grant wanted a building. I wanted my life back. I did not get the old one. I got a harder one. A sharper one. A life with locks on the doors and names on the paychecks and a black sign that tells the truth before anyone buys a drink. Sometimes I stand near the entrance at midnight, when the line is long and the city shines wet under the streetlights, and I watch people hand over their coats. They never know what I am thinking. They never know that the woman checking the room once spent 2 years behind a counter, listening, waiting, bleeding quietly, buying the floor piece by piece. They never know that the cruelest people in the room usually make the same mistake. They think the person holding their coat is holding nothing important. They forget a coat has pockets. They forget pockets hold keys. And they forget that sometimes the woman they tried to turn into furniture has been studying the wood, the nails, the walls, and the deed to the entire house. Vivian threw her coat at me like I was nothing. She did not understand she was handing me the final piece. By midnight, I owned the floor. By morning, she owned the scandal. And by the time the music came back on, I was no longer standing in her club. She was standing in mine.